Hello, this is Michael Hexter. Welcome to my Politics 2100 video cast here on YouTube. So this episode I'm calling Are Democrats / Centrists in a Media-Supported Cult 2? Cenk's Theory Considered. So Cenk is Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks. So people who are looking at my videos probably are progressive or liberal or left of center, maybe even socialists, or at least that would be some of the audience, the more likely audience of these videos. And people in that area and definitely, would be opponents of Trump and the Trumpist Republican Party. So, I'm assuming that you people are pretty comfortable with the idea that the right wing, people on the right wing, and this has been the subject of a lot of videos on the channel here, they live in a bubble, an information bubble that their media ecosystem has created, where they are wildly misinformed and also stoked with narratives that support their preferences and their ideology or their ideological tendencies, and maybe just some of them are just totally misinformed and then create their worldview or an act politically based on that poor information. For instance, most obviously the big lie of the election, the fact the election, or the idea that the election, the lie told by Donald Trump and by his allies that the election was illegitimate and Joe Biden is illegitimately the president, so forth and so on. And anyway, and so that's just the most obvious example. And then we have all kinds of swirling around COVID-19, around vaccines, around masking, around that are of a similar variety. So anyway, but putting that aside, Cenk has advanced a theory that is, I think, very plausible, and I, from my own personal experience, feel like it has resonance. That there is also another media cult, media fuel cult, or the mainstream media has created a propaganda, has done free PR and created a glow around centrist politicians, so mostly Democrats or center-right politicians, and made them seem to be great humanitarians, made them seem to be very intelligent and very and do puff interviews with them. Not unlike the kind of interviews that maybe a Fox host would do with certain, with either Trump or other Republican or Trumpist politicians. And so this kind of propaganda or free PR is something that I think is true. I think it's true, and Cenk and the Young Turks are particularly focused or particularly clear and focused on the role of money in politics, and that the sort of the QED or the proof that Cenk is offering is that basically the great stream of donations and various kinds of emoluments that are offered the politicians in our system, they are entirely erased from the portraits of what the politicians do, what Joe Biden does, what Joe Manchin does, so forth and so on. That they are if not entirely, they're only as marginalia as sidebars to the main story, where they, for instance, treat Joe Manchin's objections to the Build Back Better Act as an ideological issue, that he actually sincerely believes his quote unquote problems or his issues with the Build Back Better bill, or that he has genuine thoughts about these things, when it seems most likely that he's basically an errand boy for the interest, or his own financial interests, which are considerable, and then also the interest of the industries that are his donors. And so he's not alone. I mean, he is in that way quite a typical centrist, center right politician in Washington D.C., or corporate politician. So, and this so Cenk makes this case that this cult exists because basically by erasing the role of corporate influence on and mega money, billionaire influence on politicians, that you get a totally distorted view of their actions and a totally and it becomes a flattering. The vision of what they do becomes much more flattering. Than, in other words, if you think of Joe Manchin as this sincere, representative of the interests of the people of West Virginia, when polling shows that people of West Virginia want what's in the Build Back Better plan. Again, I'm using Manchin as an example. He's a very obvious example there, but this can be repeated with different forms with other politicians. In a way, he likely is the fall guy for Joe Biden, among other people, and for much of centrist Washington, in terms of being, or fall guy is the wrong word, in that he is the stalking horse, okay, for being a shield for basically the status quo in Washington, where corporate donations and corporations and large donors, billionaires, call the shots, really. And so I think, observing people I know in my life, and also people I interact with on Twitter and other places, that it seems to me that there is a cult, or a tendency to idealize politicians that I think are just openly corrupt and openly, like, for instance, Nancy Pelosi and her stock trading, her claiming that politicians using insider knowledge are just engaging in the free market, okay? And this is just, it's just so. She said it in a recent press conference, and she blithely is protecting, or is her outsized gains in the stock market, among other places, or just in general. I mean, she's extremely wealthy. She and her husband together, and they have made enormous amounts of money since she has been in public service. So her stock portfolio is a recent insider. I mean, she's not alone. I mean, she's not. In fact, the most stellar performer in terms of using insider knowledge. But anyway, there has outperformed the market by many points. So anyway, this snow job, you could say, this whitewash, this PR that is being produced by the media, and so this is really a media critique, among other things, or a media consumption critique that Cenk is offering, and also obviously a critique of Washington and the corrupt status quo in Washington. But the there is a way in which, you know, for centrists and for Democrats and so forth and so on, and these are the people who need to act now to save American democracy. I mean, both the base, or the people who can move these politicians, who are not moving to really save American democracy and save voting rights, among other things, is one of the biggest things that needs to be done. But you know, also just doing something for the American people with the power that's been invested in them by the last election, by the 2020 election, or in previous elections. But anyway, so this they are the people who need to move, who need to do something, and this gauzy shield around them that is created by the media, and the lack of challenge, and the lack of, now there could be some change because, you know, some donors and so forth and so on, some of these let's call them masters of the universe or whatever, the very, very powerful people who call the shots, you know, and call in favors to politicians, could you know, move these politicians to do something. And it's unfortunate, in fact, that that's the reverse of what should be happening. In other words, they should be listening to us, the American people, their voters, and they're not. And so, I mean, that's just a tribute to the enormous corruption of our political system. But anyway, but similar, so, and this is something that also Young Turks, and I'm indebted to their reporting on this, they've also noticed that there does seem to be a movement in the Republican side in terms of mega donors and corporate interests. They seem to be moving against Trump and the big lie, and the promotion of the big lie, and the headlong rush into some kind of neo-fascist situation. Okay, that there's, and again, I'm not vesting any hopes and not sitting back and thinking that this is going to solve our problems at all, but there seems to be within the Republican ecosystem, and I will try to find a link to show you this particular, there's been some Congress people who have been speaking out against Trump, and there's clearly a move, a concerted move that seems to come from, again, the donor class, the hidden, you know, Oz behind the curtain, you know, who is now, politicians are making decisions by themselves to do certain things, so it's not as though these are exactly they're being, you know, managed, you know, to a T by these donors, but the donors have enormous influence and enormous, and it does seem that their power is it seems like whatever's passed in Congress and whatever actually gets through is always vetted by corporate interests, and is watered down. Anything that even challenges tangentially corporate interest is so watered down, and is so weak that it only can function as this fig leaf for politicians to say, well, look, I did this thing for you. Oh, look, I did this for you. And so it's I'm sorry to, you know, it sounds cynical, but it's simply, we just have to look at the facts. We have to look at the reality. And right now, anyway, in my experience, in my seeing, again, people I know be swept up in cult-like, you know, sort of admiration for people who I don't think are admirable at all. Like, you know, I think Joe Biden is not particularly admirable. I don't think Pelosi or Schumer, they are bad politicians. They're not really good politicians, and they're not really good principled people. it's not hard to say that. I don't think. I mean, it's only hard to say that if you feel like you're divorcing yourself from this cult that I think accurately is diagnosing this, where you feel like you are not part of the crowd anymore. You're not part of the team anymore. If you notice that, hey, wait a minute, they fail. For instance, in the impeachment, the way Pelosi and Nadler and so forth and so on designed the impeachment of Donald Trump, it was designed to fail. It was not going to win. There were just, there's so many choice points, where, and now I'm talking mostly about the Democratic leadership. This gauzy cult can also be extended to Republicans, and certain, Republicans are, for instance, George Bush, has been rehabilitated, and this gauzy, celebratory, rosy hue can be, extended to him or to Liz Cheney and so forth and so on. And so to the Lincoln Project people who are, were former Republicans or, whatever, are never Trump Republicans. And so it's not only to Democrats that this kind of, that can be made this objects of adoration. So anyway, so I will try to find some, this is something that Cenk has been bringing up more recently as a theory, and I think it's a theory. I'm just putting this out there as a way to, say, in an informal way, in a non-systematic way, say, in my observation, I think there's a lot of truth to that, and it's unfortunate because, we need people to have critical, have their critical faculties as voters and as citizens sharp, and be able to see reality, see the reality of our politicians, see the reality of our situation, and then to act accordingly to save democracy, gain some in our social welfare provisions in the United States, and act rapidly and decisively on climate, on the worsening climate, and on our emissions that cause the climate to degrade and to heat. So anyway, so if you are enjoying, or if you have any thoughts about the particular content of this video, please, share a comment in the comment section. If you liked it, please like the video, and also if you're liking Politics 2100, please subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.